Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the podcast show for the average Joe. I'm your host, Mitchell Roulane. This is the Wrestling Diaries. And I would love, and so would my co-producer, Matt, if you would go check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, leave us a review. Also, to see the video content, go to YouTube, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for more content we release once a week. The show is about people from everyday society and the things that make them who they are, right? We're investing in the being of the person and the things that they wrestle with. Today, I have a really good friend, somebody that me and Matt and a lot of other of my friends have a lot of history with, our old youth pastor, Mr. Paul Turner.
Thank you, everybody.
We should start doing like, you should start putting like an audience feedback in there, Matt, you know? Like all that stuff. What's up, Paul?
What's going on?
It's good to have you on the show, sir.
Yes, sir. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, you know, I was hard up for guests.
You were hard up for guests.
And I was like, oh, I need somebody. No. I'm just giving.
I knew it.
For anybody listening, I'm giving him flack because he was like, oh, you must have really needed a guest really bad. No, man, you're a super interesting person. And I've actually wanted you on the show for quite a while.
Well, thank you very much.
I guess this is the first time I had a chance to reach out for this specifically.
Sure.
And then also, we got to do those lobster rolls.
Yes, remember? Please. Lobster rolls. We got to go to...
Where is that?
I know. You got to find them on Twitter, wherever they're at.
Okay, because the truck moves.
They move, yeah.
Oh,
so
like that.
They were down in Avondale not too long ago. So
what I was just saying to everybody listening was you used to be our youth pastor when we went to Garywood Assembly of God, and we were young. What is it? I don't want to say insubordinate teenagers, but we
hooligans.
Hooligans. There you go. We were a motley bunch.
You
remember
were.
That? I remember the senior pastor John Loper. Yeah,
that's right. Yep.
And like we were helping you out with one of those wide opens.
Yes.
And then we're out there with our long hair and holy jeans,
yep.
and we're helping you.
Yep.
And he was like, Paul,
yes.
What are you doing with this motley crew here? I was like, oh, with the band? We're a motley crew of people. That was really great.
It was. It's a highlight.
And I'll never forget that one of my first experiences with you, like when you came and you replaced Patrick Conrad, I think was his name.
Yep, that's correct.
You kind of took a shining to me and Thomas initially. You invited us out to lunch and stuff like that. And I've always wondered all these years later, I don't know if I ever actually asked you. If I did, I completely forgot. But what was it about us that you wanted to hang out? Like, why did you want to hang out with us? We looked like crazy kids.
It's exactly the reason I wanted to hang out with you is because you look like crazy kids. And that's part of my DNA, being a weird kid growing up. So my heart always goes out to those who are a little, different or don't look like they fit in with society, maybe.
Yeah.
Because they have that kind of edge to them where everybody else can kind of guess, they're very vanilla, maybe. But I tend to gravitate towards those who are a little bit different and who just look like they could get wild. And I go, look, if these guys here would, give their heart to Christ, man, they could do some incredible things using whatever gifts and talents God's given them. And I just said, look, we're just going to go on a journey together. And that we did. And so I think all my reasoning was validated for making those connections.
I think that's a nice way of him saying that he likes freaks, Matt. I like freaks. Look at these freaks.
Okay, well, maybe.
Were you I don't know if I've never asked you this before. Were you like a punk rocker growing up? You know, like that, kind of punk rock thing? Because that was our mentality.
Well, sure. Well, I had a punk rock mentality, although I wasn't necessarily into punk. Of course, there was the Sex Pistols and things like that. So yeah, so I gravitated. I was more growing up in the 80s. I was more maybe into metal.
Okay.
Into the real Motley Crue.
Yeah,
right.
The real Motley Crue.
The real Motley Crue. And so I was into all that world.
Yeah.
Big fan of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
Played.
And that game's been around forever.
It has. And so I was always in that nerd crowd, but I always wore I had zero school spirit. Like I could have cared less about school. I wore black on red and white days. Just to be
nice.
Obnoxious. So you can kind of see a little bit where maybe my personality as a youth pastor saw those guys there. They remind me a little bit of me. So let's go for that. I want the outliers, man.
Yeah, I always try to tell people that punk rock is like for people that don't understand like more of the concept of it, it is more of like an idea than it is just like a scene or a music.
Mhm.
Like, it's like we're like me and all my friends were, I guess, nonconformists. We just wanted to dress like we wanted to dress and do the things we wanted to do that we liked, and it didn't matter if everybody else is doing the same thing and blah blah blah.
Yep.
So I feel like individualism is what people should strive to be, right?
Absolutely. And we in our youth group at the time, we had all kinds. We had all kinds of people, but I thought we had a very loving group that kind of welcomed everybody in. Everybody kind of, coexisted very well. And so yeah, so I tried to make that the norm where it wasn't like, oh, look at those guys. They're weird. No, no, no. That's just who they are. They're part of us though. They're not out there, whatever,
Yeah, and I remember we all like me and Thomas really liked Patrick a lot, but then you came along. I was like, oh, this kid, he bought us Taco Bell. So I think we might have a new favorite youth pastor. So we love some TXB. Represent. But yeah, where did you come from before you started your job at Garywood?
So yeah, before I came to Garywood, I was working at a Christian camp down in Vero Beach, Florida, and I was working there. I'd worked there. I have a long history with the camp. The camp's called Life for Youth Camp in Vero Beach, Florida, and they that's where I went to as a camper, and wanted to give my heart to Christ there, and worked several summers there. Was I was like worked up in leadership, was Bible team leader, was camp pastor, was day camp director for a year, and did all that stuff, and then eventually was working there for 4 years. And it's also the place where I met my wife, so
Oh, wow.
also a special place. We were counselors together, and the since 2001, I have been speaking there every summer, and this summer, going back, will be my 20th year speaking for a week at camp there.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
wild, dude. Are you originally from Florida?
No, I'm originally from New York. I actually grew up in New York till I was about 11 or 12.
Oh,
And then my
wow.
dad passed on, and my grandfather was living in Vero Beach, Florida. So my mom and I wound up moving to Vero Beach to stay with him and take care of him, and that's how I got to Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you don't really have that New York lingo going.
Not anymore. I don't. It's been, being in Florida will do that to you for a little while. But then once you marry a girl from Alabama,
Oh, was she originally from Alabama?
yeah,
Okay.
Hueytown is.
She was just in Florida for the camp.
She was in Florida for
I
the
see.
camp. That's right.
Okay.
And all things being connected, her church growing up was Garywood Assembly.
Okay.
So she had gone there for years and years and years. And then she's the one that found out that there was a job opening. I was not going to go back to full-time youth pastoring for various reasons.
Right.
And I just said, this would get her closer to her parents. And I said, I can't be selfish about it. So I'm going to apply thinking there's no way I'm going to get it.
Mhm.
I thought, I'm not going to get it probably. So I went ahead and applied, and lo and behold, got the job. So
Wow. How
what do you
about
know?
them apples?
What do you know?
Where's the bulk of like your family at now? Like, is it in Florida or New York or in Alabama? Is it spread
Interesting.
everywhere?
You're talking about my immediate family,
Right.
And there were people that are like cousins, things like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Sure. Well,
mom, dad, brothers, sisters.
Sure. Well, that is an interesting story as well, because when I left New York, and I was 11, 12 years old probably at the time, and I really was connected with a lot of my cousins. You get together for family and things like that.
Mhm.
But moving to Florida just decimated all that. There was really no connection because there was no internet. There was no way to really communicate. I mean, if you wanted to go back and visit, I guess you could, but it wasn't good for facilitating that. And so for me, I was very much alone, in the sense of I'm in a new place called Florida, and had nobody really. And so after my mom passed in when I was 30, I really had nobody at that point. So after having both parents pass on, and then being distant from cousins and things like that, it was essentially, where you feel orphaned, right? We have
Sure.
the only family I had was the family that I created.
Right. Yeah.
That I made. I made. myself.
I have created these lives.
Look,
Yeah.
you are alive because of me, and my wife. And so that was, the solid unit there. And then just so funny you asked it, because just probably 5 days ago, I heard after 40 years, had gotten a message from one of my cousins
Wow.
in New York.
Wow.
And we talked for about 20 minutes. So she wound up calling me. And so her name's Karen. And over the years, over the past probably 5 years, I would say I got in touch with maybe 3 cousins. My cousin Danny, who I was close with, my cousin Nancy, and now Karen. So that was an interesting set of circumstances.
I imagine it was refreshing to catch back up with them, though, right? After all these years?
100%.
Catching up on all lives that have happened for
decades. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're trying to catch up, and you're trying to squeeze, that amount of time in such a short amount of conversation.
Yeah.
And my hope one day is to go maybe fly back up there and maybe visit with them.
Sure.
Just to kind of get around and be able to talk and have conversations, because it's funny, because when you are distant like that, you tend to lose a sense of self. You lose a self, part of your identity almost. Because I was really a New York kid growing up in Brooklyn, and when you don't have family, I mean, in reality, I'd have to go back and ask them. That's probably what I will do. I says, look, what do you remember about me? Because I don't remember a lot necessarily about myself at various ages, because they were all older than me. So I would have to get their perspective to even understand what I was as a kid, which is kind of weird, right?
You were hard nosed. You was beating people with bats, robbing them on the side of the road for a cannoli.
Or a slice of pizza.
Get him some pie. You broke that kid's nose. He wanted a pie. You want to give him some money for the pie.
I hope it's not that, but it's probably.
Based on what you've been saying, though, about all that, I guess it's safe to assume that you don't have any siblings then. You're an only child?
I don't. I'm actually.
That explains a lot, Matt.
It sure does, yeah.
I'm kidding.
I'm actually adopted.
Oh, okay.
And so is my wife.
Wow.
Which I did not know until I
didn't know this
met her.
Now.
And so both of us are adopted, which is interesting too, that my daughter went into, worked with an organization that was about adoption, international adoption. So that was fun to see that. So for me, I could have siblings out there that I don't know about.
Yeah. Like biological siblings.
I could have biological siblings. And so you have, you have so much involved with being adopted, right? You get the idea that you're chosen, right? Because that's the thing they tell you, right? You're like, well, every other kid was made.
Yeah.
They just were random, and you were chosen.
Wow.
And so that's great up until a point. And then you're like, yeah, but I kind of would like to know what the rest of the story was.
Yeah. Right. But, you always sit there and wonder, I imagine.
Yeah, it's like how terrible I was. Was I an ugly baby that they had to give me away? I mean, you think of things like that, especially when you're younger. I don't think about that now, but I always think about, and somebody said, well, why don't you go and do research? And, and of course I've done some ancestry.com type stuff, but without names or without certain things, you can't really make all those connections. But for me, I was happy to say that the mom and dad that adopted me is my mom and dad. I don't live with regret. I live with wondering, but I don't live with regrets. Oh, I had a whole nother life, which, by the way, I don't know, could have been worse or far worse.
Sure, yeah.
Had I stayed maybe in the family I was in, right? So you don't know. But I think this is the road that God put me on, and so that's the road I stayed on.
When did you, if I can ask,
yes,
when did you find out that you were adopted? Like,
also a terrible story.
Oh no,
it just gets worse. It just gets worse, right? This is like people are listening to this going, this poor guy, what is wrong with him? What has happened to his life? My mom, unfortunately, had issues with alcohol.
Okay.
So the night that I found out that I was adopted, she happened to be drinking that night, and which I think she needed that liquid courage.
How old were you?
Oh gosh,
8. Oh wow. Okay.
Something ridiculous. My mom, God bless her. Listen, I don't want to paint pictures here that are not true.
No, of course
not.
Both
my mom and dad were good parents, provided for me, worked their rear ends off, fabulous people. Alcohol has a problem, has a way of dealing with things. But also I would not call them worldly people. I don't think either of them finished high school, to my knowledge. So they were super basic people. Yeah. And so for my mom, she probably needed a little bit of liquid courage because she felt maybe responsible to tell me that. First of all, probably the wrong time to do it. 8 is a little young.
Yeah.
B, the circumstances, also not great. let's not do drinking to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Because then I was like, because I thought she was pulling my leg. I thought she was like this is a joke. Like, I'm not
Sure,
really yours.
of course,
And at
yeah.
8 years old, I don't know, right? I'm like having a fit at this point. So, God bless her. That was she told me probably when I was 8 years old, and it was a bit traumatic. But I recovered, and but it was a little it was certainly not the way I would have liked to have found out something like that.
My sisters used to try to troll me when I was little and be like, "Oh, yeah, you were adopted. Your mom just picked you up." And I was like, "Oh, is that why I'm so much better looking than you guys?"
Ooh, there you go.
Boom.
Chapow.
That's what happened. You don't mess with 7-year-old Mitchell.
Don't do it.
But anyways, so that was that pretty traumatizing for you, I guess, as an 8-year-old?
It was. And once again, my mom loved me, cared about me, but I think she felt at some point she had to tell me that. And she chose this time to do it.
Yeah.
Can't control any of that. But
do you feel like something like that makes you grow up faster? Like hearing something like that?
I think it does in a way, because you have now you're burdened with this knowledge, right? You're burdened with a sense of self that you weren't aware of. That now you have, not only do you have the life you have, it's like being told, like in the movies, like you were really like a part of a family that was like had billions of dollars, and you were kidnapped.
Yeah.
Right. And you were like put on an island, and you lived with this family, and then you come to find out that you have a whole nother world that was out there that you don't know about.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what? And then you have no way to investigate that. You have no way to compare. You have no way to connect. You have no way to, there was no solution to that. It was just kind of the bomb that gets dropped on you, and you're like, oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
You're adopted.
So after it like all came out, and that was like just common knowledge now in your household, did your parents never tell you about your biological parents or any of that, or did they know? Or
they only knew a little bit. They knew that my dad, for some reason, they knew my dad was a guitar player. How they knew that, I believe they were college students.
Okay.
So God bless my biological parents. For at the time, I mean, they could have chosen abortion. They could have chosen other things, other choices that they had.
Sure.
So kudos to them for, letting me stay around.
Yeah.
Or
right.
we would not be having this interview.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, it's, I had limited knowledge, very limited knowledge of who they were. That's all. Maybe because my adoptive parents only had a limited amount of knowledge. And that's the part of the problem too, is when people pass on in your life, you can't ask them the questions, especially when you're 8 and your dad passes on, right? So my dad probably died of cancer when I was 8 years old. And so you're not able to go back, and then the people start dying who knew him start dying. And then you're not able to ask the questions when you're old enough to articulate the real questions you want to ask.
Right.
And so when all that's happening, then at 30, when you really want to start, then your mom passes, then you really have nowhere to go. So this connection with my cousins, who knows? Hopefully I'll be able to ask some questions down the road and be able to say, well, what was that like? What was my mom like when she was younger? And what was my dad like, when he came home from the military, or when, questions like that you don't have any concept of when you're 8 or 9
so
or 10
then
years
now
old.
Those cousins then are biological cousins, or
No,
they're the cousins
they're
through
the cousins
the
through the adopted family. Yeah.
But then they might know more information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About my at least about my adoptive mom and dad, that I would want more information on,
Sure,
at least who they were as younger, who they
Okay.
were when they adopted me, who they were,
I get what you're saying.
who
I gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, I see. I'm a huge creature of closure, right? And so, like, something like that would just irk me to the core, because, like, it's just not knowing. It doesn't matter that I was adopted. It doesn't matter, like, what, like, that stuff is whatever. But like, just because I want to know why and when and who, and like, I'm like, and when I don't get closure, it just freaks me out. Like, I'm a creature of closure. I have to have closure. So I would be like, man, clawing at the walls. Not saying that you should be doing that, because we're two different people, but.
Well, no, I understand. I completely understand that. And I guess because I had to resolve, right? You have to, when you can't find closure, the right kind of closure. And I'm a big fan of that in youth ministry, right? To be able to close out when you're a time or your season. I think that's important, right? In ministry, in jobs. Nobody likes to just get fired with like loose ends, right? Everybody, we all want life to be tied up in a certain way.
Right, yeah.
Right, to find the closure.
There has to be the end to the story.
Right. And oftentimes that the end doesn't come for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They're left, and they either claw at the walls, right?
Yeah.
Or they find resolve,
Mhm.
and they have to find the resolve to say, "Listen, I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know the answer to that question, and I just have to live with that."
Yeah, it's like you have this mystery box you cannot get open. There's no key to it, and then eventually you're just like, oh,
Like
just throw it.
Patrick and SpongeBob.
Yeah, sure.
Patrick had SpongeBob had a secret box, and
Yeah,
Patrick had a secret box and
couldn't get it open.
couldn't get it
Yeah.
open. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. And finally, she's like, whatever, I don't care anymore.
yeah. See, there you go. You eventually just go.
Like hopefully one day I can attain that amount of composure to myself where I'm like, just open, damn you! I just want to see what's inside. But you know.
Well, I understand. But look, when you have, and I think you go through once again an identity change, right? So when I was 8 years old, you go through somewhat of an identity change. Now knowing knowledge about, that there's a secret, there's something that happened, right?
Yeah.
And I would say also there was an identity change when I was 13 years old and I'd gone to camp and I had found Christ, and that's a whole new identity. So the unresolved parts of my life somehow get resolved because there's a scripture in the Bible that says, that he is a father to the fatherless about God. It talks about that in Psalms. And I hooked onto that, right? He is a father to the fatherless.
Mhm.
And so not only was I fatherless twice, right? So I was like, now I'm like, well, who's dad, right? Who's my father? And so
Right.
when I went through that, I went through another identity change through knowing Christ. But that also brought, because of the scriptures and because of, those things that I found resolve in that. And I think that's just an important component of my life is that, having a relationship with God adds a little bit of the end to some of the big questions, not all of them, because I still have lots of questions.
Sure.
So-
Yeah. I can see that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, why not?
Why? Not sure.
So what made you get into the whole Jesus thing?
Well, that's a great question.
The Jesus culture.
Jesus culture. Not the band. But
Oh, is that a band?
It is Jesus culture.
culture.
Is a band.
Oh, I
Yeah.
honestly did not know that till
See?
just now. How about that?
Fun fact.
Yeah.
So for me, going to the camp, right? I grew up in New York and I grew up Catholic. So
Okay. All right.
growing up Catholic, so I've always had a background in faith or religion.
Sure.
But even as growing up in New York and growing up Catholic, growing up Catholic and growing up in any other church is completely different. Catholicism, there's a lot of standing up, there's a lot of sitting down,
Mhm.
there's a lot of kneeling.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those. I went through the whole deal all the way through my what's called confirmation because I went to what's called catechism class, and I remember going to walking when I was in New York. I'd walk 6 blocks to the church, by myself to go to the class and then walk back. So in doing that, I had a knowledge of God, and what the Catholic Church taught me was really about reverence, right? So when you're in church, don't it's not about how you dress. It is about your attitude, though. Don't take the things. Don't treat the things that are supposed to be sacred. Don't treat them with mockery. Be reverent.
Sure.
Even if you disagree, be reverent.
Right. Have respect. Right.
Have some respect. Right. Yeah. It's okay to disagree. To me, it's not okay to, like I said, to mock or to be, be a jerk about it. If you don't agree, that's fine. You don't have to come back. Right. But for me, I learned reverence. I learned, looking at stained glass. I learned about art, believe it or not. I learned about beauty. I learned about a lot of those things. And so in coming to Florida, when it was totally different, because that's when you started hearing things like, if you wanted to come to Christ, which was new verbiage for me, right? Because in the Catholic Church, once you're baptized as a baby, you're in.
Right.
You're in the club.
Perfect.
Okay. You're in the Catholic club. You can come on in and take communion and do all that stuff.
Nice.
But now I had to figure out now, what is this personal relationship with God? So I had to figure that part out. So I thought it was funny that, of course, then, you see people raising their hands during worship and things like that. I'm like, what is going on?
It's like a completely different narrative, but to the same story.
100%.
Right.
So people would raise their hands, and I'd be like, the only time in New York City when you see people raising their hands is when they're getting held up. And I'm going,
give me that money for the pie.
I said, who? Give me the money for the pie. Where? And by the way, I did see a mugging when I was probably 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
Happened right in front of me. Like these 2 guys went after this couple, just were beating them down.
Oh my goodness.
And I ran. And my friend who I was talking with, I'm like there, and he slams the door and I'm knocking on the door. So let me in, man.
What in the
Let me in.
world?
These people are getting mugged out here. And so I had to go around and jump like a couple of fences to make sure these guys didn't see me. as some sort of potential witness of some
Right,
kind.
yeah, a rat. They don't
A
want you to be a rat.
They don't want to be a rat. And in that area,
Yeah,
that's
you know what happens to rats.
it's a bad place to be a rat in
I
Brooklyn.
can't believe you should unfriend this person from Facebook immediately.
Absolutely.
This person is not a good friend.
Absolutely.
Sounds like something Matt would do to me.
Oh
Just kidding,
no.
Matt. I'm kidding, Matt.
Yeah. Look, just feel free to edit him, Matt. Just cut out and make his words say something else. Something
that just reminds me of I really love Matt a lot. And
There
it's not
you
even my
go.
voice.
That's right. Just
It's
edit
his-
your own voice in.
Yeah,
Matt.
he puts his own voice in.
100%. And so, and now discovering that you can have a personal relationship with Christ, in this, I was like, okay, that's new and different and unusual. And so, once again, you go and you heed the call. You kind of like, but you know what? Even that, I can remember when it for me, when I encountered Jesus, it really wasn't in like the church service. I was talking one-on-one with a counselor in the game room. And he led me to Christ right there. And then I opened my eyes like after prayer, and it was like the whole world had just been created like just a few seconds earlier.
Mhm.
And like you're looking at a brand new world. And so for me, having, discussions with people and talks with people and community and those things are super important in how Christ is relayed to people, right? Whether that's over a meal, whether that's just sitting at somebody's house or whatever it may be. So me, that's how I found Christ and been trying to figure out how to, follow Jesus, over the past 40 years
Wow.
is quite the task.
So, it's basically it's what defines you, pretty much.
It does. It does. When when I went from being like they asked me, what do you want to be in high school? I said, well, I really had three choices, really. I said I could be a professional bowler.
You good at bowling?
Not bad.
Nice.
Not terrible. At the time, I was bowling in tournaments.
Okay.
I had bowled like when I was 14 or 15. I had bowled a 201, which I thought was like cool. And I thought about it. Right? I thought about maybe professional bowling. That'd be fun. Social work. I said, well, I want to give back to the world. Maybe. I said, well, how can I do that? But here's the deal, though. The thing that sold me on being a youth pastor, and I was a youth pastor for 30 years. The thing that sold me on being a youth pastor was I had good youth pastors. I had 3 different youth pastors in my life. The first one taught me about books and knowledge. He let me borrow anything out of his library anytime and read whatever I wanted. And he was a good youth pastor but he always irked me, especially when I was a teenager, because I'd ask questions. He said, well, what does the Bible say? I go, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you, dummy. You're the professional here. I don't know anything. So he would say, well, here's a book, or here's, he would address things and give me that. And I said, oh, that's how I find knowledge, right? I got to read things and read my Bible and so forth. So my second youth pastor really taught me about the power of relationships, right? Taught me about the power of relationships. He's the guy that would drive me home. He would, from a meeting, he would pick me up. He really just taught me how to love people. And then my third youth pastor really taught me about the power of sharing Christ with others and really passing on a faith to somebody else. So that was, to me, that at the end of the day, being the third choice. Well, I could be a youth pastor. I think it was almost destined at that point because I had such really good influences and was a part of great youth groups. And so for me, the 30 years of being a youth pastor was also something that really defined me. Christ, defined my identity, right? Taking me from, where adoption in Scripture has a place too, because we're all adopted, right? For those who know Christ, you're adopted into the family. But also being a youth pastor for those 30 years was also defining in a lot of ways, identity-wise.
Yeah. What made you want to retire from it?
For me, it was a matter of and I was at a church and I was there 8 years, which was a good run. That's a good run for a youth pastor. 5 years. I was with you guys 5 years.
Yeah.
That's still a good run.
Sure.
The average, they say, amongst a lot of youth pastors, anywhere between a year and 22 months.
Okay.
So for 5 years with you guys was phenomenal. I was there 8 years and I had just turned 50 and I really wanted to go into the world and I wanted to pass along what I knew. And I was tired. Part of me was tired. Part of me was aggravated at church systems, which I've always been. You guys, if I told you stories,
we probably know some of them.
You would know some of them if I told you them. You'd say, oh, that's why that happened or this. And look, I was an advocate, not just for you guys, but for the youth ministry, because I always had people want to say negative things, and I'd be like, I always felt like I was fighting uphill a lot of times because, and then look, a lot of people loved you. Vast majority of people love young people in the church, but there's also a group of people who poo-pooed ideas and how I went about things and those things. So eventually that kind of gets to me a little bit, but then you just, when you're in any organization that you feel like is not moving forward, you just feel like you can't move forward with it.
Yeah. So you got to get out of there.
And so for me, I said, I'm going to go do some coaching. And I coach youth workers. I'm coaching a couple of guys right now. And they're doing well. And then there's, I do writing and things like that. So I wanted to strike out, and I wanted to be able to do some of that because I felt like my time was done. I really did. I did not see myself going another year. So now today, I have my regular job, which is driving HVAC equipment for a company here in Birmingham, and I drive to various places and drop off, HVAC equipment to people, to companies.
Cool.
But then I spend most of my other time, working on my podcast, working on writing, working on coaching guys, and still trying to pass along to help youth workers, especially have successful youth ministries.
Yeah. Now tell us about your podcast. What's that entail? What's that? What's it called? And what do you do?
Mine is called Youth Ministry in Motion. And I always think I called it that because I always see youth ministry and faith and those as something that moves forward, right? It has to have motion to it.
Yeah.
It has to, I want to see youth groups grow, not only numerically, but I want to see them grow spiritually and grow deeper. And there's a progressive nature of discipleship that I like to see. So on my podcast, I will talk, I'll do interviews like this with various people. I have one coming up this week with a gentleman who is in charge of what's called Alpha, which is a video-based evangelism curriculum, which is really good. I've done some of that with students in the past. And so what I'll do is I will sometimes do interviews like that. And then sometimes I will just speak my mind, and I will just say, youth workers, I want to talk about this. This is, something that's bugging me. Or something else, be like I just did one called the 31 Roles and Responsibilities Teenagers Can Do in Your Youth Group. So I went through a litany of things. I talk about the economy of youth ministry, where I talk about the fact that, look, the more students that have jobs, servant roles within the church, I think, number one, hang around longer, they're less bored, and they see the connection between faith and movement. They see the connection between faith and works, right? They're doing it. And that's why I was really hard up on you, on everybody in the youth group, to participate, do something, help me, come in early, help me set up. You're doing it. Like, I can remember you guys, and I don't know if I regret this. I don't regret it. I'll say right now, I don't regret it. But you guys did we did an award ceremony one time.
Yeah. And
you guys were part of the act. You guys were part of the entertainment. And I think you came up and did a skit. I think you did Black Betty. I'm 100% sure you did Black Betty. That's and I thought,
I remember that. We all performed in masks. And nobody knew who we were.
Yep.
Yeah, we were in ski masks.
Yes.
And what was it? Track suits. We had track suits on. Track suits, Converse tennis shoes, and ski masks.
Yep. And I thought to myself,
I forgot about that.
I said, this is amazing. I said I don't regret it at all. Number one, because I didn't get in trouble for it. So it was us. So it was an us thing. Nobody really knew about it. But everybody was, loved it. They loved you guys. And I just didn't care. I was like, but that was a role and a responsibility that you guys got to express yourself in a way that wasn't, too overboard or, of course, for church, it was probably overboard, but for me, it wasn't. For me, it was like, here's some guys, and you guys did a lot of things like that. You guys did little skits, you participated in all kinds of things. But see, that's where I get in with youth workers and say, look, Jesus did not train his disciples to sit around and sit back and watch him do miracles. He trained them and taught them to participate. Mm-hmm. And too many youth workers are training and teaching their young people to sit back and watch them do the work.
Yeah.
Like, that's a loser. That's a loser deal there.
Yeah, no doubt. We also did we did a cover to Jimmy Buffett's Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yep.
Remember?
Yeah,
I had like
remember
the long blonde wig on with a straw hat. And then somebody was playing this little toy wooden acoustic that was way out of tune. It probably had like 4 strings on it.
Yes.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
It was. And every time you guys participated and did things, but you guys were super, let me tell you something. And look, from my perspective, whether it was Matt, or whether it was you, or whether it was Thomas,
Jason.
or Jason. Yeah, any of those guys. You guys were always there to help. If I asked you to do something, very rarely would you guys say, no, I can't help, or I can't do something. You guys were always there to help and do something, because you guys were ready to help, and I wanted you to help. And everything you added to the program helped out other people. Every time you participate, the small part adds to the greater. And that's the part about young people being involved in expressing their faith, or being participants in their youth groups, or things like that.
Yeah, I think the fact that we were much more accepted, like by you and some of our peers, and even some of the other people leading the youth ministry at the church we were going to, was something that really helped kind of like strengthen our faith and keep us on that path. Just because, like, we didn't feel judged and all that stuff. And I guarantee you, if we would have been anywhere else, I mean, we got some of it from there. I'll actually tell a funny story about one of these in just a second.
Oh no!
But I feel like if we would have been anywhere else, man, people would have been like, why these guys are crazy? They're dressing up weird, and they've got like, they're wearing wigs to church, and like holy jeans, and they have their skateboards.
Yes.
And they're just like, I think a lot of people assume that we were like really, like we were like I don't know, we were
anarchists.
Yeah, like, and
you've come to destroy the place.
People, I remember like somebody asking us for drugs once or something. And
Oh
we're like,
no,
huh? We don't do that.
That was probably a deacon's kid.
We were about Jesus, bro. And then we were like, man. And then I was like, I didn't know there was this label attached. I remember one time, me and Thomas, we dressed up as very like nerdy kids once. We like,
yeah.
Do you remember this?
I do.
We pulled our pants up past our belly button. We had suspenders on. We slicked our hair. We had these giant glasses on, and we wore like hats to try to like. And it was so stupid because everybody knew who we were. But we were talking in different voices, like, "Hey, I'm Jake. This is Sean." It was so ridiculous. But I remember, I think Becky. Do you remember Becky?
I do.
Yeah, Becky came up to us and she was talking to somebody else, and she was like, "Oh, I see what you guys are doing." And she was talking to somebody, and she was like, "I get what they're doing." She was like, because everybody else was talking about them like the way they looked before, with the band shirts and the holy jeans and the long hair.
Yeah.
And now they're like looking the opposite. So people are like, "Oh, look at these nerds." So they're like, you guys are like making a point. Like you're like saying like, "Oh yeah, you want to judge us when we look like, you know, like hoodlums and punk rockers." And now we're like dressing up all like we're nerds. And now it's like the other end of the spectrum. And so like, it just shows that you guys are, you're jerks, and you don't know anything about anything. And then we were like, "Oh yeah. No, we just did this because we thought it was funny." We were not trying to make some kind of political
statement here.
Not at all. Like we're just weird, crazy dudes just doing that. But then I remember thinking, I was like talking to Thomas, and I was like, wait, so people think that we were weird before the way we dress? I can't believe this stuff. They all thought we were cool. Although I don't know, some of the football players thought we were cool and wanted us to hang out with them. So we were the skater boys.
That's right.
We had our little clique.
You did.
Our little gang. It's funny too. Like after we heard that, then I started thinking like, oh, I guess everybody just thinks we're crap. And then like years later, I would meet people from Garywood and other like circles that were like, "Oh yeah, you know, like I really loved y'all's little group. Like I was always like, I wished I could be friends with you guys, or you guys are so cool." And I used to be like, "Really?" We were like crazy, and you know, sometimes we could be like buttholes. But it surprised me how many people actually looked up to us. And I think what it wasn't because we looked like a bunch of like rebels or whatever, maybe, but I think it was our friendship, our close knit unit, and that's what people were in love with, and that's what people were like, "Oh man, that's what I want that. I like that." And so many people would come up and like after like, years later, and I'd be like, "Wow, really? You looked up to us? Why? What's wrong with you, dummy?" We're the last people you should be looking up to or wanting to be a part of. We're goobers.
Yeah, you're goobers. Yeah, but I would disagree. With looking up to you guys, because I think you took who you were and said, "Hey, you know, I'm going to interject myself into this spiritual space and with Jesus." And I think people are insecure by nature anyway. They look at other people and they look at their lives. They go, "I'm not interesting."
Okay.
Clearly, I feel that way, right? Because
you made the comment.
I made the comment, right? So we're all insecure. We all think that we're not. But you're right about that, about the community you guys had, about the tight knit. But I think it was part and parcel of that you guys were free to be who you wanted to be, which nobody else could be, right?
Okay.
But
Sure.
also the community aspect of it. Not only could they not be who they really wanted to be, they were afraid to be that, but they didn't have anybody else that they could have done that with.
Yeah.
Right. So they did their own thing, and that was fine. It's not knocking them. It's just making a point of saying that, you guys who you were, and I think people did look up to that because of that. But I also remember, like I said, you guys did things. I mean, you guys shared your hearts. I remember asking you guys to share, or I remember asking you guys to share a verse, or I remember Matt giving me one week, I think it was offering one week that he was on he had made a commitment of some kind and says, hey, this is my offering, like which would blow people's minds, right? If I told people, I said, look, I had kids that were riding skateboard who gave money because they wanted to give into the offering, they wanted to give something, and regardless if it was a dime or a dollar, it didn't matter. The point was that I challenge people to give on all levels, right? Give of yourself. If you can't give of yourself, give of your money, or give of your something. Find a way to participate in this thing, and I would challenge that because I believe giving offers a reciprocal nature. It's reciprocal in nature that you give, right? Jesus says, give and it'll be given back to you, shaken down, pressed together, and running over into your lap.
Yeah.
I still believe that. That in giving, that comes back to you. And so when you guys did that, whether it was your time or you gave money or you did something, you shared. I mean, to me, that was the whole deal. That was the whole deal, is that you guys were able to love Jesus and be yourselves. And that's, I think, what Jesus wants everybody to do. Just love him and be yourself.
Yeah, we just did what we did just because it's what we like to do. There was no like philosophy behind it. What we did, we just did whatever. It didn't matter like what people thought. This is just what we felt was cool.
Yes,
how we wanted to look, the way we wanted to, present ourselves, our character, and that was it. I mean, I still live by that motto now as an adult. Like I dance to the tune of my own beat. That's exactly how it is, and that's the life that I'm gonna live, and the family that I start and have, and that's like what I'm gonna instill in my children and their children's children, because I feel like it's the most important thing.
100%. Right? I agree.
That individualism is very important.
I agree.
But the story I was going to tell about people, I don't know, I guess judging us from our surface level for the way we looked and stuff was. So one night we were at, I think it was like me, Jason, and one other person. Maybe it was Thomas or Ivy or Matt. I'm not sure. Were you? As I'm telling the story, Matt, maybe you'll remember and you'll know if you were there or not. You might have not been. Anyways, it was a Sunday night service, so we're in like big church.
Yeah.
Right. And Pastor Loper was up there preaching, or he was going to be preaching. And I remember like sitting in there and I was like, oh crap, I don't think I put any deodorant on. And then so I lift my arm and I'm like, oh, sure didn't. And I was like, oh crap, there's people around, there's cute girls over there that will probably talk to us after the service is over. I got to go put some deodorant on real quick. So I got up and went out to my truck parked outside to get deodorant to put it on because it was in my truck. And stupid Jason like sees me get up and then he follows me. He follows me out there, and then I'm going in there and I see him walking out, and he was like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, what are you doing? I was like, dude, you're drawing attention, because I stood up when everybody was sitting down, because they were somebody was giving a message and they were about to pass it on to Loper.
Sure.
And so like I was like, oh, I don't want to do this, but I really need to do this. If I don't, like I don't want to stink. BO is a major thing, ladies and gents. Yeah. Don't do it.
Right.
So I'm getting, and then Jason follows me, and I knew in my head as like a 16-year-old, I was like, dude, that draws attention. Like, so if one of us gets up, it's fine. Maybe I'm going to the restroom. Then you're getting up and falling right behind me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, and I was like, dude, what are you? And he was like, oh, I was just seeing what you're doing. I was like, I'm getting deodorant, man. And he was like, oh, okay. And he's just hanging out. And then like Ben Callahan saw us, and he wasn't in the service. He was just driving by in his truck. And then he pulls in. He's like, hey guys, what are y'all doing? And we're like, I'm not doing anything. And then some other kid walked up that was, I think, in the service, like one of our like outside friends out of our circle, but was like pals with us. came out, and then Josh, what was his last name? He rollerbladed. Josh.
I know you. I know
you know who I'm talking about, right, Matt?
Yeah.
You remember his last name? I don't remember his last name. He rollerblades up. He's like, "Hey guys, what are y'all doing?" And I was like, "What is happening right now?" You ever seen that movie? There's Something About Mary.
Yeah.
You know the scene in the bathroom?
Yeah.
And then everybody's coming in to see him zip himself up.
Yeah.
That's what this felt like.
Yeah.
And I was like, I came out here to put on deodorant. Jason followed me out. Ben Callahan pulls up. Some other kid walked out to see what we're doing. And then Josh rollerblades up here. So there's just a bunch of people. It's like we're having a block party out in the parking lot. And sure enough, lo and behold, I look over and guess who's walking out in their 3-piece suit?
Yeah.
John Loper.
John Loper.
Pastor John Loper. He's walking out. He's got this smug look on his face. And then he's like, all right, fellas, that's enough. Let's get into the service. We don't need to be out here smoking. All right. It's enough of the smoking. We're trying to do some Jesus time here. Stop the smoking and come inside. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, and then Ben was like, oh, well, I'm not even in the service. So he drove off. And then, some of the other kids were walking back. And then we were walking back. He was like escorting us back into the church, basically. And I remember looking at him and I was like, Pastor Loper, I was like, no, we weren't smoking. I wasn't smoking. Nobody was smoking out here, but we weren't smoking. I came out here to get something. And then he completely dismissed me. He was just like, oh, okay. Yep. Like he didn't want to listen. I was like, no. I came out here I wasn't going to say, I didn't want to say deodorant because it was embarrassing. He probably wouldn't believe that anyway, maybe.
Yeah.
But he just completely dismissed it. He was just like, I was like, oh, we weren't out here smoking. He's like, okay.
That's part of the issue. I feel like youth pastors are interpreters, right? We have to interpret the language of senior pastors who are normally of a different age demographic to young people. And I must interpret. It's like two people you have to that do not speak the same language at all.
Yeah.
And youth pastors come in and have to relay and communicate what did young people say and what did this person say?
Yeah, man, you're a generational translator.
I am. That's exactly what I am. And I would say this, that as youth pastor, Pastor Loper did not tell me no on very many things. If I wanted money for something and I pitched the idea, he'd give it to me. So I want to just throw that in there, that as maybe his social or cultural, what do I want to say, is not there, right? Especially when dealing with maybe young people, that he cared in a different way. What he couldn't do culturally or socially, he did financially by keeping that youth program moving in regards to that, which is what many senior pastors do. The sad part is that a lot of senior pastors don't get to know their young people as well as they should.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, judgment is a part of that, especially at the time when we were doing it, because there was a lot of cultural things that were going on in the world that did not make sense to him. And so when you heard a news bite back then, I don't know if it's true now, but it was almost like it was gospel truth. Like, oh my gosh, young people were wearing trench coats. So if somebody was wearing a trench coat at the time and somebody had done something bad in a trench coat,
sure, yeah,
and you're wearing a trench coat, it's exactly where the brain goes to in the minds of certain pastors of a certain age who will immediately think that must be what's going on. And so, I don't defend everything, but of course I don't defend like he just accused you of smoking, but in the parking lot. But that's where most brains would go.
Here's the thing. I'm joking around about it a lot.
I know you are.
I get it. I mean, I don't like, at the time I was super bitter though, right?
Sure.
I was like 16 years old.
I understand.
And I was like, oh, I look up to this guy. Like, I'm going to church for all the right reasons. And he's accusing me and he wouldn't even let me plead my case. Like, I can't believe this. I don't know how I feel anymore.
I know.
And now, like, as an adult, like, I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah.
I was like, Paul, I'm so glad you came on here, man. We've really rehashed a lot of cool history here.
We have.
Good old G-Wood.
That's
Hopefully
right.
we get some G-Wood people that check this out. Anybody listening to this, give us a special shout out.
That's right.
Give Paul a shout out.
Give me a shout.
If you remember any of us. In our
remember us.
motley crew.
Our motley crew. Oh my goodness.
We do appreciate it though, man. Like you definitely stood out. Even if it wasn't just about like being at church and you being a youth pastor, just that you were a great shepherd. And I don't even mean to say that just in the context of faith or religion,
right?
But just like you were a great older mentor, right? And there wasn't a lot like there was a lot of adults that we were around that just didn't have that flair that none of us had. And a lot of us friends, we didn't have a lot of fatherly influence because we came from broken homes and stuff like that, and a lot of I guess daddy issues and things like that. And so
Sure.
there was none of us had any older brothers or dad-like figures that really, I don't know, kind of was like understood us and also helped to kind of like nurture who we were as young humans coming up into our own. And especially when you're a teenager, you got raging hormones and you don't know where your life's going and what it means. And I feel like for us, we had the luxury of, even though in being that, because we had each other, that was our unit. But then to have an adult that was on the outside that was like, oh, I get you guys to an extent. I get you guys, and I see what you're doing, and we really appreciate that. That was really huge for us, I think.
Well, it's a privilege for me.
Yeah,
a privilege.
Yeah, the honor's all yours.
Honor's all mine. I won't go into all the trouble that I got into, but that's okay.
Hey,
because of it. But it was
okay.
Worth it.
We don't mind. We didn't have to deal with it.
That's right. And the fact that we talk about Wrestling Diaries, we could go into the whole wrestling at camp.
Oh, gosh,
was a whole nother element,
yeah.
which I think has maybe impacted the name of this podcast. Maybe that, and the fact that you guys were backyard wrestlers anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, the name of this podcast is infected by the fact that we did backyard wrestling.
Yes.
And that we were professional wrestling fans growing up.
Yes.
So I planned on wanting to write a book, and the title, The Wrestling Diaries, is like a double entendre. Like it has two meanings. One is it is actually talking about legitimate wrestling.
Yes.
Because the story is based off of some of the characters that we created fictionally.
Yep.
But then it's also about a character who is wrestling with his own personal demons. So there's and then I was like, that's actually a concept that everybody deals with. So I want to start a serious podcast, and I'm going to call it The Wrestling Diaries, because the Struggling Diaries just don't have the same ring to it.
You're absolutely right. It's a good name.
But on that note, Mr. Paul Turner, preaching and teaching all those impressionable minds out there.
I am.
Sir.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you as a man in this world are struggling with yourself? What are you wrestling? What are the demons that you are always trying to overcome? Or maybe not always, but here and there. What are those monsters in your closet that you're fighting with to try to keep in there?
Wow. Well, I have a lot of them. We don't have that much time, I don't think. But but I would say this. Men in general struggle with work identity, right? That your calling in life. What is it? What am I supposed to do with my life? And then you have a job, and you have a job for so many years or whatever it may be, and maybe you leave that job, and then you're kind of lost on the wind a little bit, right? So for 30 years, I was a youth pastor, and then I've gone through the process of saying, well, okay, what am I then, right? What am I then to the church? What am I then to? Because I'm not a professional youth pastor. I'm not paid. I'm not on staff anywhere. I'm not. And so when you begin to kind of untangle that a little bit, you have to say, well, where was my identity all those years? I would like to say that my identity was in Christ, but as a human being, as a man, you have this job, this role, this shepherding responsibility that I've had for so long. And now you're like, yeah, I don't do that as much anymore. I don't hang out. I'm not, necessarily around a group of young people, except the young men that I coach through the coaching program, which I think it still helps me facilitate that. And so when you peel all that away, you have to then, deal with the fact that, well, you're not that anymore. Well, if you're not that, then what are you? And so I think that's part of my next step of my journey is discovering that and taking some of the things that I was good at, whether that was shepherding or teaching or speaking or communication or mentoring, and then saying, let me take those malleable skills that worked in youth ministry and how does that fit maybe into other places in culture and life. And so I think that's my next big struggle is finding out where those things that I was good at for a long time, how can I find a place to best use those within my life now.
This next question I'm going to ask is really great because it's right up your alley, because you, being a youth pastor for all these years and teaching and preaching to young people, I asked this question about, if this hypothetical or theoretical question about what if we had a telephone time machine and you could pick any point in your life, you pick it up and you dial a date and you can call yourself from that past, a point where you probably needed that phone call the most. And what do you say to yourself? And I feel like this question is just built for you because you've built your whole career and everything, your identity on helping young people, right? In any way you possibly can. And so what point of your life, your young life, do you call? And it might not even be you as a kid. Maybe it's you as a 30-year-old man. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you pick up on this telephone time machine? What date do you call? How old are you? And what do you say to yourself when you feel like this version of Paul needs this version of Paul's advice the most?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call probably 19-year-old Paul.
Okay.
At some point. And I'm going to call him because I never got a degree from college. And understanding the length of life and how long I would live at this point, I would tell him, I'd say, listen, man, I said, life's going to be hard enough for you. But if you don't get a degree, it's probably going to be even harder for you somehow. So I go to college, finish college, and get your degree. And I would tell him that not because I needed a degree to do youth ministry. I needed the degree after youth ministry.
Okay.
And I'd say, get the degree anyway. It doesn't matter what it's in, political science, it doesn't matter. Just get the degree, anything, and just have that under your belt. Now, several years ago, I went back to college, but I am 1 credit shy of an AA because I cannot pass math. Taken algebra 4 times. I took it 2 times in class, 2 times online, and I cannot pass it. There's a word for that. There's stupid is the word, I believe. but there's another word that where math is just not a thing for you. You just cannot. It doesn't translate or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I would call 19-year-old Paul and say you need to get your college education probably.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that. That's a good one. That's a good staple. Do you think that? And I have to ask this: do you think though that that's important for everybody, that they have to have a college degree to do whatever they want to do in life, to chase whatever aspirations or dreams or goals they have?
No, but even their dreams and goals and aspirations, they don't last forever. In other words, you're going to find yourself at in-between places of your life where that degree might matter, right? Where you say, well, I would like to teach, right? You have a certain gift set or a certain skill set that works well in a place that you might need a degree for. So having the degree isn't about, you don't need the degree to live your dreams. The degree is simply
like a
what
fallback.
It's a fallback, but it's what at this point in the universe where the degree is still a thing. In other words, they're still judging you based on what college you went to, what was your GPA, so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Until that's not a thing anymore, you should have one. You don't have to have stellar marks. You can get all D's for all I care, but get the degree and at least say that you have something so that if you go somewhere for whatever reason, whatever the powers that be are looking for on that resume, they will see that you have run the gauntlet and you have successfully somehow graduated from a higher education institution and would be an asset to their whatever they have.
Okay. Very well said. Yeah, I personally have my PhD in thugonomics.
Thugonomics.
Give me that pizza. Give me that money so I can get that pie. Yeah. Great, man. Okay, cool. And in finality,
yes.
sir, one day, hopefully very, very, very far in the future, when you're long and gone, what is the legacy that Paul Turner leaves behind on this world to his friends, to his confidants, his family, and everybody that knew him? What is that? What do they etch into your stone? What do they write poems and books about? What do they speak in your eulogy?
Well, you know what? I always think about that. Of course, you think about your life at a certain age. You think about what you want to do. And I always thought at my funeral, I would want a cross section of people to speak at it because I don't want I don't want people to know Paul Turner as one thing. I don't want them to say, well, Paul Turner, he was a great youth pastor. Okay, that's great. What else did he do? Right? He did some other things. I wouldn't mind. I think part of my legacy is sitting in this room here. I think Matt, I think you are part of that.
Okay.
Because the things, right? It's who you impact. It's who you choose to give your life away to is part of that legacy. And so, for me, I would love to have a cross section of people who know me from different avenues of life, who don't know each other, that would see a different perspective of who I am. So I think my legacy is, yes, probably a large part of that is youth ministry, but I think a large part of that is just the people you impact in different ways throughout your life. So I think if you were to put it succinctly, if I would put it succinctly, I'd say, look, that Paul Turner's life was about impacting others in a positive way, whether that was through the gospel, or whether that was through being helpful, or whether that was being a servant to people, or doing what he could. I would say that that would probably be my legacy.
Nice. Roll Tide, roll.
Roll RTR.
Roll damn Tide. That was great, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, dude. I really appreciate it. You're a jewel. You are a diamond, sir.
A flawed jewel, but yes, a jewel nonetheless.
Next time you come on the show, we'll have to talk about some more nerdy stuff, man.
Oh,
like
buddy,
comic books and sci-fi.
I got
Heck
stuff.
yeah.
I got stuff for you, man.
Let's do it. Before I sign us off, though, man, you can look into that camera. Go ahead and promote your podcast, your literature, anything you're working on right now, any creative projects. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, anything. First of all, thank you for watching or listening. And if you want to see the work that I do, you can go to thediscipleproject.net, and all the links will be there to be able to find the podcast, blog posts, things of that nature. And you can hit me up on the socials, on Instagram at the D Project.
Excellent. Thanks so much for being on the show, man. High five,
buddy.
bro.
High five, man.
Boom.
Love you, buddy.
I like it. Love you too, bro. Thank you so much, everyone, ladies and creatures and gentlemen. I'm not a creature. I can't believe you said that. I hope you enjoyed this episode today. Good friend, confidant, mentor, Mr. Paul Turner was on here and talking about a lot of cool stuff about his faith and his history and his careers, and even some deep stuff I didn't know about, like the adoption stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that, man. I know for some people that's a really touchy subject, so I really appreciate you opening up about that. What does youth mean? I always give these final thoughts like Jerry Springer, right?
Please do.
What are these? How do you feel about your own youth? Also, if you could call yourself, you're listening to this right now, you hear the sound of my voice. Think about it. Close your eyes if you have to. If you had to call yourself back at any point when you were younger, what do you say to yourself when you're troubled and you're down and out? How do you shepherd your own self? And have you had mentors in your life, and what have they meant to you? And has there been anybody that is not in your peer group, your senior, that has influenced you in the way that Paul has influenced me and my friends? And if so, who is it? I mean, it could be anybody, your dad, your mom, your brother, just an older friend, a cousin. If you have something like that, what do they mean to you, and how did it help shape your life? That's really important. And then also, if you could get on that telephone time machine and go back and talk to your past self, what past self do you talk to, and what do you tell them? Those are really, I think that's a really good question. I don't want to pride myself on it, but I think it helps people really think. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Check out the video content on YouTube. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. God bless you all. What do you wrestle with, and how can you beat it? One love.